The hearing will come to order. As this hearing is fully virtual, we must address a few housekeeping matters. For today's meeting, the chair or staff designated by the chair may mute participants' microphones when they are not under recognition for the purposes of eliminating inadvertent background noise. Members are responsible for muting and unmuting themselves, and if I notice you have not unmuted yourself, I'll ask you if you would like the staff to unmute you. If you indicate approval by nodding, staff will unmute your microphone. I remind all members and witnesses that the 5-minute clock still applies. If there's a technology issue, we will move to the next member until the issue is resolved, and you will retain the balance of your time. You will notice a clock on your screen that will show how much time is remaining. At 1 minute remaining, the clock will turn to yellow. At 30 seconds remaining, I will gently tap the gavel to remind members that their time is almost expired. And when your time has expired, the clock will turn red and I will begin to recognize the next member. In terms of the speaking order, we'll begin with the chair and ranking member, then members present at the time the hearing is called to order will be recognized in order of seniority, and finally members not present at the time the hearing is called to order. Finally, House rules require me to remind you that we have set up an email address to which members can send anything they wish to submit in writing at any of our hearings or markups. That email address has been provided in advance to your staff. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for my opening statement. The subcommittee will come to order. We are here today to discuss the fiscal year 2022 budget request for the Army Corps of Engineers and the Bureau of Reclamation. Your agencies steward the lifeblood of our society and economy and serve the critical function of protecting the life, safety, and sustainability of our nation's water resources. Thank you to our witnesses for joining us today. We are so glad you are here, and we look forward to being able to introduce each of you shortly. Our nation continues to experience devastating and repetitive floods across our country over and over. Last year at this hearing, we discussed the 2019 flooding on the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. And 10 years ago, we had the Great Flood of 2011, which impacted many of the same areas, demonstrating the recurring flooding challenges many regions face. Last year, during the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season, we had the highest number of named storms ever recorded, 30 in total. We are about to start another season. In the Great Lakes, water levels are finally decreasing after 2 years of record high water, although some lakes remain above average. Much work remains to prevent future flooding and the onslaught of algal blooms impacting our communities, especially as we confront our planet's changing climate. Next week starts an unpredictable 2021 hurricane and tornado season. Flooding isn't our only concern. Major parts of our country are dealing with too little water. Over 92 million Americans are currently living in areas experiencing drought. 8 states have areas that are experiencing exceptional drought, the highest intensity level on the drought scale. Last year, we had a record-breaking wildfire season across the West brought on by this continuing drought. California and Colorado experienced their largest wildfires to date, with 4 million acres burning in California alone. Climate change is accelerating and exacerbating these extremes, and communities are caught in the crosshairs. Though the water resource needs of our country vary from region to region, there is a constant and essential need to invest in our infrastructure to adapt to a changing environment. Without these investments, the dichotomy of water surpluses in the heartland and water shortages in the West threatens our way of life. For example, the Colorado River is in crisis. Diversion from it supports over 40 million Americans across 7 Western states and 29 tribal nations. Meanwhile, in the Great Lakes region, the largest body of fresh water on Earth, we continue to deal with the economic and environmental threats that algal blooms and invasive species like the invasive Asian carp pose to the Great Lakes and its $7 billion freshwater fishery. Together, our committee and the Corps are making great progress on the Brandon Road project, the new Sioux Lock, and addressing harmful algal blooms in the Great Lakes. As we begin our discussion on fiscal year 2022, I must first note that we look forward to receiving the full budget request later this week so that we can move forward expeditiously to craft our bill. I am encouraged by the President's budget and his request for the Army Corps of Engineers, but have reservations. We are making progress in these requests, but it is still $1 billion of decrease from last year's enacted level. I look forward to working with the Biden administration to ensure the Corps and the Bureau of Reclamation receive the necessary support to keep our communities safe and prosperous. President Biden is addressing the climate crisis head on, and I know that your agencies have a critical role to play in this fight. We look forward to hearing how your agencies are incorporating climate change impacts and mitigation efforts, as well as making our communities more resilient. There is bipartisan support in Congress for the work that your agencies undertake on behalf of the American people. Thank you for being here, and we look forward to hearing from you. I'll now turn to our very able ranking member, Mr. Simpson, for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairwoman Capter. I'd like to join you in welcoming our witnesses. We appreciate everyone being here today to discuss the fiscal year 2022 budget requests for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the Bureau of Reclamation. Unfortunately, as of today, we know very little about these budget requests other than the overall funding level request for the Army Corps of Engineers. This delay in getting details is not unusual in the first year of a new administration, but it makes this committee's job more challenging nonetheless. The budget request for the Army Corps of Engineers is $6.8 billion, a reduction of $1 billion from the FY 2021 enacted level. This request does not include the FOOSRAP program, so when comparing like programs, it is a decrease of $750 million or 10%. We don't yet know the overall funding level request for the Bureau of Reclamation, but if history is any guide, it will represent a significant cut from the enacted level as well. Reduced budget requests, even substantially reduced budget requests, are no surprise. It happens almost every year, regardless of who's in the White House or who's in charge of Congress. The infrastructure investments carried out by the Corps of Engineers and the Bureau of Reclamation are critical to improving our nation's economy, public health and safety, and the environment. I'm confident that once again, this committee will work together to provide strong support for these programs. Without specific funding proposals to discuss, I will focus most of my questions on how the agencies will approach execution of the programs provided in a final appropriation bill. Unfortunately, I continue to have concerns about certain management issues, including adherence to congressional direction, which is incorporated into law, as well as the focus of so-called innovative financing efforts. My concern about these budget request proposals and work plan process decisions now span about 3 different administrations, which only strengthens my belief that these problems stem from someplace other than the offices of the witnesses before us today. Thank you, Chairwoman Capter, for calling this hearing. I look forward to discussion with our witnesses. I yield back.
Thank you so very much, Ranking Member Simpson, and let me express the subcommittee's gratitude to our witnesses for joining us here today. We welcome your observations of how the Army Corps of Engineers and Bureau of Reclamation can strengthen our nation's water infrastructure while creating more and better jobs as our nation confronts new environmental challenges like the climate crisis. First, we will have Mr. Jamie Pinkham, the Acting Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works. In his role, Mr. Pinkham establishes policy direction and supervises the Department of the Army functions relating to the Army Corps of Engineers Civil Works Program. Prior to his appointment, Mr. Pinkham served as the Executive Director of the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission. Before that position, he was the Vice President of the Bush Foundation, a private foundation in St. Paul, Minnesota, where he led the foundation's Native Nations program. He has significant experience advocating for tribal sovereignty, self-determination, and treaty rights. Mr. Pinkham is a citizen of the Nez Perce tribe. Mr. Pinkham, thank you for recently visiting Ohio and our district, where you were able to see the importance of dredging in the Great Lakes and how crucial it is to maintain our harbors to provide safe and efficient navigation throughout the region. In addition, thank you for visiting projects across our district to see how we can continue to improve upon our policies for using dredged material in a way that supports our communities and ecosystems alike. Next, we will have Lieutenant General Spellman. Lieutenant General Spellman assumed duties as the 55th Chief of Engineers and Commanding General of the United States Army Corps of Engineers on September 10, 2020, after most recently serving as the Deputy Commanding General for Civil and Emergency Operations. He previously served as the Commanding General of the Northwestern Division of the Corps, where he oversaw an annual program of more than $3 billion in civil works, environmental restoration, and military construction in 14 states, primarily within the Columbia and Missouri River basins. His military awards and decorations are impressive and include the Distinguished Service Medal, the Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars, the Purple Heart, and the Combat Action Badge. I often say, especially on this Memorial Day week, where do we get these fine Americans? And finally, we will have Mr. David Palumbo. Mr. Palumbo is the Bureau of Reclamation's Deputy Commissioner of Operations. He oversees operations in Reclamation's 5 regions, the Native American and International Affairs Office, and Technical Resources. He has vast experience overseeing complex water and power projects and has worked extensively with tribal nations, including negotiating and implementing Indian water rights settlements. Mr. Palumbo was awarded the Superior Service Award in 2011 and Meritorious Service Award in 2014, 2 of the department's highest honors for career employees. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Without objection, your written statements will be entered into the record. Please feel free to summarize your remarks in about 5 minutes each, starting with Mr. Pinkham.
Chairwoman Capter, Ranking Member Simpson, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to be here today to discuss the President's budget request for the Civil Works Program of the Army Corps of Engineers. As you know, the President's discretionary funding request for fiscal year 2022 was submitted to Congress last month. That request laid out the President's priorities for discretionary funding with recommendations across a wide range of federal programs and policy areas, and outlined a strategy for reinvesting in the foundation of our country's resilience and strength. The President's top-line discretionary funding request for fiscal year 2022 includes $6.8 billion for the Army Civil Works Program, and that will be used to develop, manage, restore, and protect water resources, primarily through the construction, operation, and maintenance, and study of water-related infrastructure projects, as well as to regulate development in waters of the United States and to work with other federal agencies to help communities respond to and recover from floods and other natural disasters. This funding request is the highest annual budget ever requested for the Civil Works Program. It supports significant investments to improve the condition of existing water infrastructure, to improve including U.S. coastal ports, while incorporating climate resilience efforts into the commercial navigation, flood and storm damage reduction, and aquatic ecosystem restoration work of the Corps of Engineers. It will focus on investments that yield economic and environmental returns, increasing resiliency to climate change, facilitating safe, reliable, and sustainable commercial navigation, and accelerating and improving the delivery of water resource projects. The Army will use these funds to invest in the construction of projects that will facilitate commercial navigation, reduce the risk of damages from floods and storms, and restore the nation's aquatic ecosystems. It will invest in programs to help communities identify and address risks associated with climate change and improve the resilience of course infrastructure to climate change. The Army will also use these funds for significant investments to facilitate safe, reliable, and environmentally sustainable commercial navigation at the nation's ports. With the details of the President's budget, which will present a unified comprehensive plan for America to address the overlapping challenges we face in a fiscally and economically responsible way, will be released this coming Thursday. And I look forward to discussing the details of the fiscal year 2022 budget funding requests for the Civil Works Program soon thereafter. And I am honored to have been selected for this position to help implement the President's priorities for the Army Civil Works Program. And I've been on board for just over a month, and I've had the opportunity to make 2 trips, one to Tacoma Harbor in Washington State, and another to multiple sites throughout West Virginia and Northern Ohio, including Cleveland and Toledo. And I've been impressed with the professionalism and dedication of the Corps of Engineers employees who build and maintain water resource facilities for our primary civil works mission. They live and work in the communities they serve, and there's much to be done, and I'm excited to be a part of this team. And while the 2022 2022 budget has not yet been released, leaving me unable to respond to specific detailed questions. I look forward to working with you in the days ahead and responding to the best of my abilities to the questions that you may have. And thank you again for the invitation to join you today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pinkham. We wish you well in your great responsibilities. Lieutenant General Spellman, please begin.
Well, good afternoon, Chairwoman Capter, Ranking Member Simpson, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm privileged to be appearing with the Honorable Jamie Pinkham, who, as we work together to address our nation's water resource challenges. I've been in command of the Corps now for a little bit over 8 months, and we've had several leadership changes since the last opportunity that we've had to testify before the subcommittee. We farewelled General Semonite on the 10th of September of last year. We changed all 3 of our deputy commanding generals. We swapped out 7 of our 9 regional commanders and 16 of our 44 district commanders. So in short, we've been through a lot of leader transitions over the past few months. I would like to provide just a few brief highlights of the great work our new team is accomplishing, as we are already making progress on 3 of my initial focus areas. And those are transforming our organization, expanding research and development, and strengthening our already talented civilian workforce. And these are just a few of the key initiatives that we will use to optimally leverage annual appropriations, meet the priorities of both Congress and the administration, and ultimately deliver on our vision, which is to engineer solutions for our nation's toughest challenges. Over the past several years, the Corps has successfully delivered an annual civil works program in the range of $7 to $8 billion. I want to expand this competency into one that can deliver double that benefit by stretching our dollars further through better partnering practices, revolutionizing our processes, and seeking efficiencies with functional pilot programs. Our nation is again seeking to renew its infrastructure, and the Corps is poised to support this pivotal modernization. Some examples of our initiatives include the Corps' continued efforts to build upon public-private partnerships and other innovative financing solutions such as WIFIA, which was generously enabled by this committee's appropriations this fiscal year. We are also working to streamline our regulatory program by providing straightforward, common sense rules, but we continue to face challenges with a static funding stream during an ever-increasing demand on these resources. We will continue to seek efficiencies in project delivery by reducing cost, optimizing schedules, and eliminating unnecessary redundancies. We have successfully validated a number of these concepts through implementation of the Regional Dredge Demonstration Program on the Gulf Coast, as well as furthering potential efficiencies in our navigation program by advancing the beneficial uses of dredge material. In order to achieve our vision, we also need to elevate research and development. We are working to expand our R&D initiatives and strengthen our partnerships with academic institutions to leverage the enormous capacity of our nation's scientists so we can meet the challenges of the 21st century today. Investment in research and development will help us find solutions for today's challenges like those posed by harmful algal blooms, reservoir sedimentation, engineering with nature, and integration of big data into our disaster response programs. And then finally, successful investment in our future cannot be accomplished without the talented and passionate professionals of our workforce. People remain our greatest resource. Investing in our people, our leaders, and diversity in all its forms, as well as maintaining a commitment to safety, are keys to developing our future team. For over 245 years, the Corps has served as the nation's engineers. We have risen to meet the challenges of the day, and today is no exception. We will engineer the future, but we don't do it alone. We need the help of our partners, project stakeholders, and Congress to enable us to succeed. I look forward to continuing our great collaboration with the committee as we strive to finish quality projects on time, within budget, and doing it safely. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the subcommittee. I look forward to answering any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, General Spellman. And I just want to point out to all of our witnesses and those who are listening, we have an outstanding turnout of our committee membership on both sides of the aisle. This is just a great subcommittee, and I thank all the members for participating. Mr. Palumbo, please begin.
Thank you, Chairwoman Capter, Ranking Member Simpson, and members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to discuss the President's budget for the Bureau of Reclamation. I am David Palumbo, Deputy Commissioner for Operations. The Bureau of Reclamation is the largest supplier and manager of water in the nation and the second largest producer of hydropower. Reclamation manages water for agricultural, municipal, and industrial uses, the environment, and provides flood control and recreation. Reclamation enjoys a close bipartisan working relationship with the subcommittee. This relationship has helped us address both long-standing and emerging challenges in the West. Many of these challenges will continue to require close cooperation and innovative solutions. Addressing drought, climate change, and issues of equitability and sustainability are essential, as are the continuing needs of secure, maintaining, and modernizing our nation's water infrastructure. To start, I'd like to acknowledge what is probably at the forefront of many members' minds: the significant, expansive, and persistent drought. It has been an extraordinarily dry year for much of the West. As you can see from the current U.S. Drought Monitor map, every state west of the 100th meridian is experiencing some level of drought, with many of the 17 Western states experiencing extreme or exceptional drought. These dire hydrologic conditions have resulted in the need to make difficult decisions. Many farmers, tribes, stakeholders, and related communities have had to make significant sacrifices. This situation further highlights the need for extensive planning and work to make our infrastructure more resilient to withstand future water resource scarcity and variability, as well as to maintain healthy ecosystems. Reclamation's priorities reflect this vital need through a commitment to drought planning and response activities, such as the 7 basin states drought contingency plans and system conservation agreements. This budget request also acknowledges the need to continue to develop and deploy science-based drought and climate change adaptation strategies. Reclamation's Water Smart and science technology programs directly contribute to these administration priorities. Reclamation also continues to emphasize its important role in renewable energy. The 40 million megawatt hours of clean energy we generate each year displaces over 18 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions and supports grid stability and other renewables like wind and solar. Reclamation must also plan for the future of its infrastructure. Reclamation's dams and reservoirs, water conveyance systems, and power generating facilities serve as the water and power infrastructure backbone of the American West. However, much of this infrastructure is aging and in need of critical maintenance. BF Sis Dam in California, for example, which provides 2 million acre-feet of water storage south of the Delta, is one of the most significant funding needs under Reclamation's dam safety program. However, it is not sufficient to address infrastructure needs without considering economic inequities and the needs of underserved communities. As illustrated by the President's executive orders and the recently proposed American Jobs Plan, this administration is committed to generating broader economic opportunities and fostering greater social inclusion. Reclamation is establishing and rebuilding water infrastructure for underserved populations by ensuring that clean drinking water is reliably provided to all communities. Our budget includes funding for Reclamation's Native American Affairs program to enhance our technical assistance to tribes, and includes funding for Reclamation's Rural Water program. The Bureau of Reclamation remains committed to working with Congress and our operating partners and stakeholders in carrying out our mission and responsibly planning for the future and playing a meaningful role in the modernization of the water and energy sectors of our nation. The challenges of drought and climate change demand such action, as the need for broader economic development and more equitable outcomes do as well. I again thank the subcommittee, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Palumbo, for your statement, and I remind all members and witnesses that the 5-minute clock still applies. If there is a technology issue, we will move to the next member until the issue is resolved, and you will retain the balance of your time. You'll notice a clock on your screen that will show how much time is remaining. At 1 minute remaining, the clock will turn to yellow. At 30 seconds remaining, I'll gently tap the gavel to remind members that their time is almost expired. And when your time is expired, the clock will turn red and I'll begin to recognize the next member. In terms of the speaking order, we'll generally follow the order as we did in our first hearings, beginning with the chair and ranking member. I will note that one of our dear colleagues, Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz, is chairing a hearing at her military construction hearing occurring just now, and she will join us for a round of questions, and we will work her in when she arrives so she can return to chairing her hearing. I'll recognize members present at the time the hearing is called to order, recognized in order of seniority, and finally, members arriving after gavel by order of arrival. Additional rounds of questions may occur after all members have had an opportunity to go through our first round. We'll now begin questioning under our normal rules. I wanted to first ask General Spellman, if I might, and really all of our witnesses can comment. What are each of you doing to raise the profile and capability of your agency within the administration around climate change? And how are you focusing the Corps and Reclamation infrastructure missions on this emerging area, especially when you employ so few environmental engineers in your operations?
Ma'am, this is General Spellman. I'll start. I will say that we incorporate observed and reasonably foreseeable climate change data when we formulate and evaluate projects in our decision-making process. And we certainly appreciate the support from Congress. And for example, the $5 million that we received in fiscal year 21, what that enables us to do is actually apply and translate climate science directly into actionable information to our projects out in the field. And it's work that we're prepared to continue and build upon to support readiness of our own infrastructure, particularly in the areas that you mentioned in your opening statement, areas that are impacted by drought, by flooding, by sea level rise, and certainly by water supply constraints. We look forward to continuing this effort.
General, do you have enough staff to do it?
Ma'am, you mentioned environmental engineers. So today I employ about 4,000 environmental professionals in the Army Corps of Engineers. That's about 11% of our total workforce of 37,000. So we are, as you know, ma'am, we're project funded. So we hire the engineers that we need for the work at hand. So it is likely, you're correct, I have more civil, more mechanical, more electrical, more structural engineers on hand. But then again, that's because of our ecosystem restoration work is about 8% of our total project load at the moment. I will never turn down any additional resourcing. I believe you can never have enough environmental professionals on your staff, but we are working very, very closely in Lake Erie, for example, on harmful algal blooms. We're bringing in nation scientists from Bowling Green University, Ohio State University, among others, to help us in these very important efforts.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very, very much for those comments. Do any of our other witnesses wish to comment on that question?
Madam Chair, if I could, you know, from my short term here, I see the profile of the Army Corps of Engineers profile in this area raising, and part of it is through how communities are looking to partner with them. We see it in the partnership agreements that they're doing on the ground. Also, how other federal agencies are calling upon them to assist. And I think of the work that I saw outside of Toledo, where EPA and the state is calling upon the Army Corps of Engineers to assist at Otter Creek in some environmental restoration. And in each one of my conversations with General Spellman and his staff, you know, the ideas and the concepts of adapting to the climate change and how we do decision making around climate change is always present in our conversation. So I feel that it's on the rise, and I just hope that we can keep up with the demand that's coming ahead.
Thank you, Chairwoman Capter. This is David Palumbo with the Bureau of Reclamation again. I would say that the Bureau of Reclamation is very well poised with our engineers and scientists focusing on hydrology, focusing on climate science, focusing on environmental engineering. That being said, we are looking at ways in which to recruit and retain a diverse workforce through our STEM programs to ensure we're bringing the best and the brightest on board, partnering with universities, high schools, and trade institutions to make sure that folks are interested, aware, and attracted to the Bureau of Reclamation. It's key for us. It's fundamental to have the right people to focus on these very important initiatives for the country.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. In order of appearance. The invasive carp issue is extremely important to the Great Lakes region. It's actually a frightening issue. And as you know, the Great Lakes is home to a multi-million-dollar fishing industry, actually multi-billion-dollar, $7 billion, which will be destroyed if the carp reaches the lakes. I'm pleased that the Brandon Road Lock and Dam project is moving forward to address this and garnering support from both Illinois and Michigan now. Along with my Great Lakes colleagues, I want to thank the Corps for including funding in the FY21 work plan. General Spellman, can you please provide us with an update on the status of this project? And when can we expect the pre-engineering and design to begin on this project of critical regional and national impact?
And we want to thank you for your leadership and Congress's authorization of this project in 2020. We received $3.8 million in the FY21 work plan, and we are using that to initiate preliminary engineer and design on the project. That work is already underway. As you know, this is a complex project. We're employing a lot of new technologies to deter this invasive species. Ma'am, I believe you're already aware that Illinois and Michigan, we're blessed that they have reached a cost-sharing arrangement with us. They will fund the non-federal portion of this design, which is $10 million. And that accelerated fund package is with OMB for review. And then you have my commitment that this advancing preliminary engineering design will receive my strongest technical recommendation in our budget submission.
Thank you, General, very much. I can't thank you enough. And both for the Brandon Road project and the Sioux Lock for the Great Lakes, these are critical, underlined critical. Thank you so very, very much. Now I'd like to turn to our very able ranking member, Mr. Simpson.
Thank you, Chairwoman Capter. As a unit of the U.S. Army, the Corps of Engineers has both a military and civilian leadership. Traditionally, the political leader, the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, has been responsible for setting the overarching policy directions and overall budgetary priorities for the agency. The military leader, the Chief of Engineers, has been responsible for actual execution of the program, including using technical expertise to manage execution of individual projects. Unfortunately, over the past several years, we've seen increasing involvement in and even micromanagement of the chief's role in program execution. For example, the subcommittee has heard concerns about project delays due to the Corps needing to get approval for specific work packages before proceeding. Mr. Pinkham and General Spellman, please describe your views of your own role and responsibilities with respect to the Civil Works program, as well as where you believe the dividing line is between your role and your colleague's role.
Congressman Simpson, while both the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works and the Chief of Engineers do have the separate roles and responsibilities, it's incumbent on us to work as a team and concentrate our efforts as seamlessly as possible. And so as Assistant Secretary, as you described, we provide strategic direction and we have primary responsibility, the oversight of the Army Corps' Civil Works program. And the Chief of Engineers leads the implementation of the program work on the ground. And I've been on board just for a few weeks, and I've had the chance to work closely with General Spellman and his Deputy Commanding General, as well as the headquarters staff. And we communicate weekly. He's been included me on site visits, introductions, and briefings from headquarters people to the districts. And I'm pleased with the relationship that we're building, and I intend to continue to build on a strong partnership so that those kind of challenges that you've experienced in the past don't occur into the future, that our roles are clearly defined, and we have a good, strong collaborative relationship going forward.
And ranking members, and sir, I'll just add that your overview of my responsibilities is exactly right. I am responsible for leading a team of technical experts and world-class engineers in addressing our nation's water infrastructure needs through execution of the Corps Civil Works program. As Mr. Pinkham said, we consult and coordinate regularly with his office so that the program is executed in accordance with the law, in accordance with policy, and of course, in concert with the Secretary's guidance. And we want to make this process as efficient as possible so that we have a stronger product without slowing things down. And I certainly look forward to working with Mr. Pinkham.
Thank you. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I've been concerned to see the previous two administrations, one Democratic and one Republican administration, make decisions not in keeping with the law of the Corps Civil Works program, for the Corps Civil Works program. Most of these issues have arisen during work plan processes and seem to be the result of directives from a separate executive agency. I hope we won't see these problems continue into the future. Mr. Pinkham and General Spellman, will you commit to ensuring that all directions and actions you take with respect to the Civil Works programs are in accordance with the law?
Ranking Member Simpson, when I took this office just a few weeks ago, I took an oath of office to support and defend the Constitution and faithfully discharge my duties. So, sir, you do have my commitment to follow the law.
And Ranking Member Simpson, you also have my commitment that any technical decisions or recommendations in my role as the Chief of Engineers will be filled in accordance with the law.
I appreciate that. As you know, we've had some challenges in the past when directions came from agencies, not either of yours, that interfered with that, frankly. One last question before we go into the second round, Mr. Plombo. The Bureau of Reclamation has been working with water users in my district to expand water supplies through the Anderson Ranch Dam Rise project. Can you please provide us an update on the status of this project and what the next steps are for the Reclamation's efforts to complete it?
Thank you very much, Chairman Simpson. We are working very closely with local stakeholders. Anderson Ranch project is a success story. We recently determined it fully feasible, and we're working with operating partners to develop an agreement to move forward with funding for the execution of the project and construction on the ground in the next couple of years. Very successful partnership with the local community. We have funding behind it, we have people behind it, and we have found it feasible.
Thank you. Yield back.
All right. Gentleman yields back. Thank you so much, Mr. Simpson. I understand that Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz has joined us, and I will ask her now to ask her questions, please. You are recognized.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with the Army Corps of Engineers, and thank you all for your service. General Spellman and Mr. Pinkham, I fully support the Biden administration's whole of government effort to stop climate change, and part of that agenda includes protecting public lands, as you know. And I also fully support the Biden administration's efforts to restore American jobs and get this nation out of the recent economic crisis we've endured. Investing in the restoration of the Florida Everglades checks all of those boxes. It's a perfect example, as you know, of a project that fights climate change, restores public land, and generates jobs. General Spellman, the 2020 integrated delivery schedule laid out significant funding needs to get Everglades restoration back on track. And consequently, the entire bipartisan Florida delegation in the U.S. House, as well as Senator Rubio, came together to support the inclusion of $725 million in President Biden's budget request. Is the Corps committed to following the IDS for Everglades restoration? And can we expect to see a budget request in line with the IDS or a request of at least $725 million?
So, ma'am, we appreciate Congress and the administration's generous support of this very important program, as you mentioned. Currently today, this South Florida ecosystem restoration receives about 62% of our total ecosystem restoration budget. Last year, it was funded in the amount of $250 million. And as you know, that's going to allow us to complete the Kissimmee River restoration this year. We'll initiate the construction in the inflow and outflow canals for the EAA reservoir. We'll continue construction oversight of the C43 reservoir. And finally, we'll continue construction oversight and design for the Indian River Lagoon South program, which will be complete early next year. Ma'am, you'll have my strongest recommendation that we continue to fund this program to its full capability.
Right. That's a deft way of not answering my question. Can we expect to see a budget request in line with the IDS or a request of at least $725 million?
Ma'am, we're going to fund Jacksonville District to its full capability.
Okay. And does that include a request of at least $725 million?
Ma'am, it does not.
Okay. So that's disappointing. What is the Corps able to handle, and around what can we expect with this funding? Because, as I've said in these hearings before, the longer that we extend out the Everglades restoration, the longer it takes for the projects that are behind us to receive funding. So, what is the expectation for what the Corps will want to do?
So, ma'am, I would just say we've been on a very good trajectory with this program in fiscal year 20 in the amount of $220 million. Last year, as I mentioned, in the amount of $250 million. Again, that funds the Jacksonville District to its capability. And I would foresee in our budget recommendation continuing along those lines of that trajectory. Of course, if there are opportunities to expand, we'll certainly make our strongest technical recommendation to the administration.
Will the Corps be requesting all of the funding that you could spend in FY22 for the Everglades restoration project?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I want to just touch base on the EAA reservoir that you just mentioned, because it's vital to reducing harmful discharges that have long plagued the St. Lucie and Caloosahatchee River estuaries. Does the Corps intend to proceed with speed and urgency to build that project? And what more does the Corps need to proceed with it?
Ma'am, I would like to have a continuing contract authority, and that's one of the discussions we're having with the administration for some of the larger efforts. Of course, the reservoir build itself beginning in fiscal years 23 and 24. What that allows us to do is build this reservoir largely using the same contractor without obligating the administration to further outlay. So it reduces risks in the amount of contingency that contractors will place on that project. And it also allows us to accelerate schedules by 2 to 3 years in its completion. So that's one of the things that we'll be working on with the administration to have that in.
Okay. Well, if you need assistance, obviously, I would love to be kept apprised. I know Congresswoman Frankel would as well, who's also on the Appropriations Committee. And Madam Chair, we look forward to working with you. You've been a really stalwart champion of the Florida Everglades, and look forward to hosting you when we can finally take that trip that we've been talking about down to see the beauty of Florida's river and crest. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we appreciate your hospitality. We want to take it up as soon as possible, believe me. And thank you for leaving your own meeting to join us today. We appreciate it very much. And we know you're championing the Everglades. We know the needs of Florida. Now we just got to get the administration's budget to be sufficient to meet a lot of needs across the country.
Exactly. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much. Now, Chair of our Defense, Ranking Member of our Defense Subcommittee, Mr. Calvert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us today. As you all know, the West is facing an historic drought, and California is looking at our third driest year in history, at least on record. While we can't make it rain, I'm sure glad to see that the Biden administration is taking the drought seriously, and I'm cautiously optimistic that the Drought Interagency Working Group will take a serious look at water storage and the infrastructure investments that California needs to rise above the drought cycle. There's plenty of low-hanging fruit here, like raising Shasta Dam by a mere 18.5 feet to store an additional 634,000 acre-feet of water that benefits both fish and people. I hope the task force will give special attention to this kind of shovel-ready infrastructure. All the permits are done. It's ready to go. All we need is the cash infusion to get this project going. This is for Commissioner Palumbo. As you know from extensive experience in California, snowpack serves as the state's largest reservoir, but we've seen more rain and less snow in recent years, increasing the need for man-made storage to capture that runoff. How does water storage fit into the administration's and task force climate and drought resilience goals?
Thank you very much, Congressman. You're absolutely right. Water storage is vital. With that loss of snowpack that is the reservoir, we need water storage wherever we can get it, looking at existing reservoirs, looking at new off-stream reservoirs, looking at better forecasts, looking at new water supplies. The administration is committed to looking at all of those opportunities to ensure that we replace the lost storage from snowpack that is really a result of a climate change multiplier that is increasing risks. So you have a commitment of the Bureau of Reclamation to focus on new opportunities to bridge that lost snowpack and the negative effects of drought and exacerbated by climate change.
Well, this may be both for the Corps and for you, but what about Shasta?
We will work with Congress as directed. Currently, we're looking at a variety of water storage projects north and south of the Delta in California, as well as across the West. So we stand ready to work with Congress as directed on any and all of those storage projects.
As you know, we always have regulatory issues, barriers to storing and conveying water throughout California. Are you going to work with us to try to eliminate or limit some of these? We're in an emergency.
Yeah, we will work together. We see whether the regulatory requirements or infrastructure needs as really complementary in most cases. It's really a function of drought and climate change. We will work together to ensure that things go smoothly and that we can get through impediments to success on the ground.
Well, I hope that the task force working with water users who know these systems best will develop those drought solutions. Before I yield back, Madam Chair, I want to acknowledge that I'll be submitting some questions for the record for the Corps. I continue closely watching the progress of the Marietta Creek Flood Control Project. I'm expecting some realistic costs and full range of benefits for this project to be counted in the benefit to cost ratio so we can move forward with an expedited general revaluation report and finally finish construction. With that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Calvert. We'll now move to Congresswoman Lee, Chair of the Foreign Operations Subcommittee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And
oh,
thank
wait, sorry. I'm so sorry.
you did that again. It's okay.
I'm sorry. Nevada Congresswoman Susie Lee.
It's okay.
It's just habit.
No worries whatsoever. Can you hear me? Yeah. Well, I want to follow up. First, I want to thank all of the witnesses today, Mr. Pinkham and Lieutenant General Spellman and Mr. Palumbo for your participation. You know, the Bureau of Reclamation plays a critical role in the management of water and resilience of climate change and drought across the West, as my colleague, Representative Calvert, was just speaking about. In my district in Nevada, reclamation projects like the Las Vegas Wash are crucial to managing runoff and maintaining water quality throughout the Las Vegas Valley, in addition to creating wetland habitat and recreational areas. And Water Smart grants are such an important program for Nevada and Western states to achieve water conservation and drought resiliency. So, Mr. Palumbo, in your testimony, you mentioned that Water Smart directly contributes to the administration's priorities for conservation, climate science, adaptation, resiliency, and serves as the primary contributor to the water conservation priority goal. Can you elaborate more on how the administration plans to use and support Water Smart going forward?
Thank you very much, Congresswoman. It's wonderful to be speaking with you. I'm originally from Nevada. Prior to coming to Washington, D.C. in 2015, I was stationed in our Boulder City, Nevada office. So I'm very familiar with the Las Vegas Wash, very familiar with your district. I'll say the Water Smart program is an umbrella program that has a variety of programs underneath it. Our basin studies, for example, focus on water and supply demands, looking at those imbalances and looking at options and strategies to bridge those differences. We have an applied science program, which is focusing on forecasting and data needs. We have conservation programs under Water Smart that are critical for areas such as the Las Vegas Wash, a variety of drought-related programs, not only to plan for droughts, but to respond to droughts. So Water Smart continues to be a cornerstone of Reclamation's budget, continues to be a focus for our employees, working with our stakeholders.
This meeting is being recorded.
I trust that you'll find the budget for Water Smart to be commensurate with the importance that we're giving it.
Well, thank you. And you would be a constituent of mine if you were still in Boulder City. So this obviously, given the record drought that we've had in the Southwest, is so incredibly important for the Las Vegas Valley moving forward. So I'll hopefully be looking for Nevada being the recipient of some of those grant funds. I'd now like to shift gears to the Army Corps of Engineers and the 595 program on the Water Resources Development Act. The 595 program has provided design and construction assistance for many of our communities across rural Nevada in helping us address issues with our water supply, our wastewater treatment, environmental restoration, and surface water protection. Lieutenant General Spellman, can you elaborate on how the 595 program fits into the administration's plans and what you see as the future of this program, particularly in the state of Nevada and also around the country?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that question. Section 595 from WRDA 99 is an incredibly important capability for the Corps. It authorizes rural water development across 7 western states, including Nevada. Since the inception of this program to today, the state of Nevada has seen $132 million worth of investments. And let me just highlight the next 2 that we're working on. We're about to sign a project partnership agreement with the Las Vegas Valley Water District. This is for the Blue Diamond water supply pipeline. We're going to rehabilitate an existing water supply system for about $1 million. Then we're going to sign 2 agreements with Incline Village. This is an $8 million project where we're going to go in and fix a sewer effluent storage pond and pipeline projects. And while these are not very large, as you know, ma'am, these are incredibly important projects for the communities that they serve. And we look forward to applying this more in Nevada and other western states in the future.
Great, thank you. And with that, I yield.
Thank you, Congresswoman Lee, so very much. And I just have to ask one more question on the subject of Nevada. General, I don't know if you have any comments about Lake Mead or any of your colleagues wish to say anything about that, but what can you report to the American people about the condition of Lake Mead as we move forward with this budget?
Ms. Captor, this is General Spellman. If the question was directed to me, I will do some follow-up work and come back to you with a more complete response. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, General. We'll now move to Mr. Fleischman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this hearing. To all the witnesses, thank you so much. Specifically to General Spellman, thank you, sir, for visiting Chattanooga earlier this year and touring the Chickamauga Lock project with me. I'm grateful for the Army Corps' diligent work on this project and for the support of this subcommittee in funding this vitally important infrastructure project. In fiscal 21, we were able to provide record funding for the Chickamauga Lock replacement project, and I understand that with this money, the Corps will be able to complete the majority of the remaining work to be done. Could you please provide me a brief update about this project, sir? Because I have one follow-up question after this.
Yes, sir, absolutely. First, I will say it was great to visit with you out at the Chickamauga Lock in February or this year. Sir, I'll start out by saying we appreciate Congress's strong support for this project in the work plan. For the members that don't know, this increases the passage capability of this system from 1 barge at a time to 9 barges at a time, and important for our navigators out there on the Tennessee River. Sir, we are 43% complete with the overall project. And as we briefed you out there at the site, we are looking for ways to increase concrete placement. So, sir, we walked you through where we had some challenges early on in bringing on labor, particularly carpenters, and that was for form work. And then, sir, you also saw the technology and conveyor belt system that we're using to get additional concrete on that site faster. We continue to work through that. Sir, with this year's work plan funding, it was generous, $191 million. We've awarded the contract to construct the new approach walls and bring the new lock online. And then next year, we'll award a contract to decommission the old lock. And as we shared with you out there, sir, with remaining funding and good weather, the early completion date for this project remains in November of 2025.
Thank you, sir. Very, very important. My second question is, as you're aware, sir, the city of Chattanooga, which I represent, has submitted an application for a project under the Section 14 Emergency Stream Bank Stabilization Program under the Continuing Authorities Program. The Riverton Stream Bank Stabilization Project, it is known, is critical to the health, safety, and economic interests of my district, as the area of the Tennessee Riverbank that is impacted includes a city-owned sewer line, if which compromised could allow sewage to flow into the Tennessee River. Any insight or status updates you could provide on this critically important request would be greatly appreciated, sir.
Yes, sir. So CAP 14 is an incredibly important capability for us, as you mentioned, stream bank and shoreline erosion program. Sir, we have the letter of intent from the non-federal sponsor, And my team of engineers, they're going through all of these letters that we have throughout the country as we rack and stack these very important projects. Sir, while I don't have a decision for you today, we will we'll keep the lines of communication wide open with you and your staff as we progress in these evaluations.
And in general, I thank you. Again, you and your staff have been most attentive to this request. And if I can personally, once again, stress my interest in keeping abreast of this project. It is critically important to our community in so many different ways. And I thank you for your service with the Corps and to our country. And with that, Madam Chair, I respectfully yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Fleischman, very much. We will call on Mr. Kilmer next, but for the information of the other members following Congressman Kilmer, we will have Mr. Newhouse and Ms. Frankel next. Congressman Kilmer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Pinkham, welcome and congratulations on your appointment. I'm looking forward to working with you in this new role, and welcome, Lieutenant General Spellman. I've valued your partnership on the myriad of core regulatory issues we've worked on in the past. I'm grateful that your agency hasn't taken out a restraining order against me or my team quite yet. But listen, unfortunately, despite that partnership, I believe you're both aware of two fairly significant regulatory challenges facing the region I represent, and I'm hoping to get to both of them. First, as you're aware, in-water construction permits have been stuck in limbo in our region for more than 2 years. While the Corps and the National Marine Fisheries Service try to reach agreement on how to define environmental baseline for existing structures. I understand the significant challenge your two agencies face in terms of protecting and restoring nearshore habitat while also developing a permitting system that allows for dependable project timelines to accomplish critical upgrades to essential infrastructure. But the fact that the two agencies have been stuck in limbo for over 2 years is simply unacceptable. And I understand that as the newly appointed leadership at the Corps, this is a problem that you've inherited, but I'm counting on you to step up and solve this because applicants simply cannot wait another season to make these repairs, many of which are necessary to address imminent safety hazards and environmental impacts. So here's my first question. What's the strategy to engage leadership at NOAA NIMFS to reach a resolution here, and what's the timeline?
Thank you, Congressman Kilmer. This concern was raised when I was at the Port of Tacoma, my second week on the job, and I asked my staff for briefing materials, which I recently received, and with my other onboarding materials. And I'll work with the staff and my counterparts over at the Commerce Department on the West Coast guidance to get some clarity on it. So I can pledge that to you that it'll be one of my priorities. So I think in addition to the timing delays, but really what are the mitigation responsibilities that go along with it? So I promise that I'll be working with the Commerce Department to get some clarity around this to make sure that our authorities are aligned with what's required under the Endangered Species Act and better understanding of what that West Coast guidance really means.
Understanding that you're still getting up to speed on it, can I just ask you to follow up with me and with my team on what the resolution here is and what the strategy is and how much longer it's going to take?
I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you. Let me shift gears. I'd like to touch on another significant regulatory challenge folks in my neck of the woods are facing. The significant backlog of shellfish aquaculture permits that the Seattle District is working to re-verify after the 2017 nationwide Permit 48 was overturned in District Court last year. I'm grateful that the Northwest Division and headquarters have directed additional staffing resources to the Seattle District, thanks to an increase in funding and explicit direction from this committee to begin working through this backlog. And I understand that significant work has gone into developing several templates for different growing areas that can help hopefully expedite approval of the standard individual permits. But despite months of work and additional staff, those efforts have not yet produced a meaningful increase in permit approvals. In fact, as of a week ago, fewer than 60 permits have been issued, and even with the added capacity, they're still only able to process about 10 per week. Even with the Seattle District's efforts to scale up at that pace with hundreds of applications in the queue, it will take 17 to 20 months to get through this remaining backlog. And I'm pretty concerned that despite the increased funding and the direction from Congress, The spring shellfish season has already come and gone, and only a tenth of these permits have been reissued, and that the region is still struggling to scale up in a meaningful way. This lag is putting many small family businesses in danger of not securing permits for planting during this critical season. So here's my question. What can you tell us today about the current and forecasted pace of processing permits for shellfish operations? Will the Corps successfully complete the 130 permits that have been identified by growers as essential to being able to plant during the current season, which ends in mid to late August? And will you commit to providing the Seattle District the resources they need to complete these priority permits before the planting window closes, so that this critical deadline is not missed and we don't lose a whole bunch of jobs?
This is General Spellman. You are correct. The court vacated nationwide permit number 48 was incredibly challenging for us. I would just add to that the revised 401 Clean Water Rule that was published by EPA has given us some additional challenges in our ability to process these permits in a timely manner. So we're dealing with some very complex legal issues, and certainly every permit we issue, we want it to stand up to legal scrutiny. So the numbers I have as of this morning are we've completed 90 permits. We have 100 permits that we have prioritized. That's for growers that have to get seed in the ground over the next few weeks, and we're working our way through that next 100. We've added 16 additional staff to the Seattle District, and so we had to train them, we had to certify them, and get them out there. You're correct. We're issuing about 10 permits a week, and we want to increase that productivity in the days ahead so we can meet this next 100. So I understand we're updating your staff weekly. We're happy to do that more frequently, and you have our commitment to get after this challenge. I'm very familiar. I've walked these fields with the growers. I understand the challenge, and we're committed to making this right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Congressman Newhouse.
In the subcommittee, water is truly foundational to our rural way of life and in the West. This year is no different. As you mentioned, Madam Chair, in your opening, we have severe water challenges, particularly in the Western United States. As you know, I represent a very rural and also very agriculturally rich district in Central Washington State. Many of my constituents are farmers and ranchers, and they depend on a stable water infrastructure for their livelihoods. My first question is for Commissioner Palumbo, and it relates very closely to what Mr. Kilmer brought up, but I wanted to underscore because it's so important. I guess, excuse me, that's another question I'll get to, but as it relates to Mr. Kilmer's issue, entities in my district, such as ports and cities, counties, and businesses, I'm getting messed up in my question. That's for Mr. Pinkham. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Mr. Pinkham. But these entities are required to seek permits, as Mr. Kilmer intimated, for maintenance and for new projects. And they depend on getting that job done as quickly as possible. As I understand it, they're currently facing great uncertainty in the permitting process as a result of a difference of opinion between the U.S. Army Corps and NOAA over interpretation and implementation of the ESA. So just to reiterate that question, what is the Corps doing to address this impasse, and how will this interpretation issue affect operation and maintenance and civil works programs moving forward? Mr. Pinkham, could you address that quickly again, as you did to Mr. Kilmer?
Thank you, Congressman Newhouse. As I shared with Congressman Kilmer, I will work with my counterparts at NOAA, at Department of Commerce, to find a quick way to get this resolved so that we can remove those levels of uncertainty. I am not sure of the direct impacts that your constituents are experiencing because of this Northwest rule, but I'd be happy to work with you to better understand the specific implications your constituents are facing.
I appreciate that. And since you do have some familiar with the Northwest, I look forward to working with you on that. Commissioner Palumbo, appreciate you being here with us today. Over the last 2 years, I've worked very closely with Reclamation on two important projects in my district, and they're administrative title transfers for the greater Wenatchee Irrigation District, as well as for the Kennewick Irrigation District. Reclamation continues to hold bi-weekly conference calls with the district managers, and certainly appreciative of this work. It sounds like we're close to completing these two transfers, hopefully in the next month. Mr. Palumbo, can you provide an update from Reclamation on the progress of these two title transfers? And if I could, I'd love to get a commitment from you today that we can close out these agreements in the coming months.
Thank you very much, Congressman. I can give you an update on both of those. First, the Greater Wenatchee, the 3 units in the Greater Wenatchee. We have presented agreements with respect to title transfer agreements, quitclaim deeds, project power use agreements. All of those have been accepted by Greater Wenatchee, approved. We're working on getting those documentation in front of Congress for the report and wait period this summer. So in the next couple of months, you will be seeing that completed title transfer package for that 90-day wait period. With respect to Kennewick Irrigation District, it is also on track, making a lot of very good progress. We also anticipate that this summer, Congress will see that completed package for the 90-day report and wait period before final completion. So both of those are on track, and you'll see those in the coming months.
Oh, very good. Appreciate that update, and certainly look forward to getting those finished. A lot of people have been working a very long time on that. But thank you very much for your update. And with that, Madam Chair, I will yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Newhouse. We are going to now go to Congresswoman Franco, and after her, Congresswoman Herrera Butler, Congresswoman Bustos, and Congresswoman Watson Coleman, and finally Congressman Ryan. Congresswoman Franco.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Army Corps for the work that you do. We know you have a lot of work and are usually under-resourced, but we do appreciate your efforts. A couple things I just wanted to mention that are very important here in South Florida. Debbie Wasserman Schultz did talk about Everglades funding, and to let you know, that is a bipartisan issue for all of us here in Florida, not just South Florida. And of course, the intercoastal waterways, harbor maintenance, very important for our economy, as is shore restoration. And next I want to jump to a subject that has been a little bit of a sore point here, especially here in the Palm Beach County area, and that is trying to see that this Herbert Hoover Dike is completed, and that this issue with the algae and folks in Martin County and the LOSUM determination. We're told that there have been 5 alternatives for how the Army Corps is going to regulate the water level of Lake Okeechobee. I want to stress that it is very important that this not become political. One of our, without getting into a name calling, one of the local congresspersons has made this a political fight in order to, and I'm sympathetic with those in parts of South Florida that are having algae outbreaks. But I can tell you that the city of West Palm Beach County, Palm Beach, that rely on the water levels of Lake Okeechobee, that they are somewhat in a panic that they are not going to be able to meet water needs if there is a drought. And I will tell you that when I was mayor of the city of West Palm Beach in 2011, we had a drought, the water levels were low, and we came days, literally days, from not having any water. And what that would have done to our economy, to our ability to fight fires, it was unbelievable. Really, the fear that we had. Luckily, it rained. That's all I can say. It rained. So, one of the questions I had from some of the stakeholders is whether or not they're asking for a delay in the LOSUM decision, which I think is scheduled for sometime in July, because they are in the process of an economic study that they want to share, because they do believe that that might influence the Army Corps in terms of which alternative to go, because if the water level in the lakes go too low, it could have a dramatic impact on our economy. Just not only the water supply, but our hospitality community, restaurants, agriculture. There are a lot of players that would be affected, not just the folks that are suffering from the algae outbreak. So a couple of questions here. One is they want to know whether you would consider a delay of the LOSUM decision so that you could get more input from our communities here. Number two, is there a way to solve, or are you looking at ways to solve the algae issue without threatening the water supply for the water users? Who wants to answer that question?
Ma'am, this is General Spellman. I'll start. I will just start by saying you will always get our best technical recommendation from the Corps in the development of the LOSUM manual. I mean, Congress, rightfully so, does not give us any relief on the project purposes for which that project was authorized and it was designed and the way it's operated. We have to meet all of our water supply deliveries. We have to meet our flood control responsibilities, our navigation responsibilities on Lake Okeechobee, and of course, we have to meet the groundwater salinity targets as well. What would help, ma'am, what else can be done with harmful algal blooms? As I shared with the governor and every congressional member that will talk to us on this issue, is water management is going to get us only so far in getting after this significant water quality problem. We've had a very successful initial research and development program in intercepting and treating harmful algal blooms. Last year, we pulled in about 900,000 gallons of water and took out of the lake about 4,000 gallons of biomass. We can, with a slight investment in R&D, we think we can increase that tenfold. And of course, then we would like to get after some industrial size solutions as well. We have another R&D program going on up at Lake Erie that may also have some efficacy for us at Lake Okeechobee. But I think, ma'am, to answer your question, what else can the Corps do? It would lie in research and development.
All right, well, Madam Chair, if we could get that information from the Army Corps, that would be much more satisfactory to get you money for that than to threaten our water supply. And I would be hopeful that you could get us that information. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sorry there, Congresswoman Frankel. I lost the mute unmute button. We'll do what we can to work with the Corps to get you the information that you need for sure. And I know the Corps would want to do that. So thank you so much, Congresswoman Frankel. We'll now move to Congresswoman Herrera Butler, and then after her, Congresswoman Bustos, Watson Coleman, and Congressman Ryan.
All right. Can you hear me? I can't see myself anymore because I had to pick up my phone to figure out how to unmute because I'm on my phone. My iPad died. All that said, it is a pleasure to have you all here. And my first question, I'm going to skip over it and do that second because I wanted to underscore what Congressman Kilmer said. I got off the subcommittee 4 years ago, got back on now, and this issue of getting the shellfish industry helping them secure the proper permits for planting, growing, and harvesting is still a massive issue for us. And I worked with Mr. Kilmer on this in this whole committee, and we secured additional funding for the current fiscal year for the express purpose of funding the additional work needed for the Corps to process permits for this season. And I have been in pretty good communication with our new colonel in Seattle. I'm very impressed with the work he's doing. He's actually moved this ball further than any of the previous colonels in his position, which is great. But I emphasize that our intent was to meet the needs of growers for this season, which is now fully upon us. The Corps has both the jurisdiction and the responsibility to process these permits. So I wanted to ask, to be specific, if a grower has identified a set of applications where planting needs to occur this month or next, will the Corps be able to process his or her permits this month and next in time to save the season?
Ma'am, so we have all of those permits that need to go into the ground this month and next at the front of the line. And those are at the top of the list that Colonel Bullock is working his way down right now.
I wanted to ask that you consider how we change this and you let us know what we need to do to help so that we are not in this position again. I know that if we process, I think there's 800 plus permits still to do, which is what you said, about 2 years worth of permitting at the current rate of 10 permits per week. That's just not good enough. We have to get a way out of this. And I am happy to do whatever I can do to give you, whether it's to help us fight for resources, to get additional staff, whatever it is, we have to change this. And let me move on to my next question. I just really wanted to underscore that. As Mr. Kilmer and I split the West or the Washington coast. You know where my district is, and Derek's. I border the Columbia Snake River system in the south that connects the Pacific Ocean in the west. And entities in my district rely on the Corps maintenance and operations of these waterways projects to continue moving. The Portland district of the Army Corps, so I get to work with both the Seattle Corps and the Portland Corps, presented their results of their latest sediment monitoring survey from late last year, and it showed that the sediment buildup that they were most worried about in Lexington had improved, which the Corps presented as good news. But I wanted to argue that this actually speaks to the volatility of the river and illustrates why the federal government needs to uphold its responsibility of monitoring every year, because the opposite could easily happen, where you have a huge buildup of sediment over a relatively short amount of time. And one of my counties, Cowlitz County, which is just downriver of Mount St. Helens. So Cowlitz needs to know if the Corps is going to provide funding this year to complete the monitoring work. Now, my understanding is that the Corps states that they want to do this work every June, but at the same time, both the locals and myself are not getting a clear answer if you're able to actually, if you move things around and find the resources to actually do it this June. Whether it's going to happen at the Portland district. And I will say that I find it frustrating to hear that you all want the monitoring to happen in June, but are unable to provide me with a clear answer as to whether or not it's going to happen. So I guess the question just is funding going to be put in place to allow the sediment monitoring that the Corps wants to do? And if not, why?
So, ma'am, we appreciate your support on this very important program. My understanding is we had the money last year in fiscal year 20 and all the money we need this year to do sediment monitoring, because as you said, it informs the flood control and flood protection measures that we take down on the lower basin. You have my commitment that I will continue to make my strongest technical recommendation administration that we fund this program going forward each year.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate your time and your service. Thank you. You'll go back.
Thank you, Congresswoman Herrera Butler. Congresswoman Bustos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This question is for Mr. Pinkham and General Spellman, both of you. Want to spell out a little bit about the congressional I serve, just for starters. I represent the northwestern corner of the state of Illinois, also going all the way into central Illinois. So right out my river, out my window right here is the Mississippi River. I'm sitting here in Moline, Illinois, just up from the Rock Island Arsenal. And then we've got the Illinois River that runs through the southern part of my district. Altogether, we have 8 locks and dams in this congressional district. So obviously, inland waterways are very, very important to the congressional district that I serve, and also to the nation. So the upper Mississippi River system is the only river system that Congress has designated as a nationally significant transportation corridor and nationally significant ecosystem. 60% of our nation's grain exports travel along the upper Mississippi River, including many of the crops that are grown in this congressional district that I serve. We're one of the biggest producers of corn and soybeans in the entire nation. So the Navigate Ecosystem Sustainability Program, you know it is NESP, it was authorized to modernize 7 locks along the upper while also providing important ecosystem restoration. So I want to first of all say that I appreciate the Corps' inclusion of pre-construction engineering and design funding for NESP working plans. However, we desperately need construction start to get moving on these projects. An unplanned closure of Lock 25 alone would result in about $1.5 billion lost to our economy. So let me start with this question again to both whoever would like to go first. How does the Corps actually determine which projects are next in line? General, you can, my time is getting eaten away.
No, ma'am, I'll go ahead and start. So as you know, we work with industry and the Inland Waterway User Board to prioritize the next set of projects. I will tell you that the capital investment strategy that was forwarded to Congress in January has NESP very high. It's in the upper tier. So we recognize the importance of modernizing this infrastructure. We have to get these projects ready for construction so we can make the argument for the New Start Authority. So with the $5 million that we received in the 21 work plan, as you said, that's going to advance the design on lock and dam number 25, the mooring cell at lock 14, and one environmental project in Illinois, the Twin Island Shoreline Protection Program. So that's the work we have in front of us now, is to get these projects ready for construction so we can make the argument for the New Start Authority.
Gotcha. Mr. Pinkham, anything to add to that?
Well, being relatively new, I'm still learning the budgeting and decision-making process of the Corps, and I'll do my best to be brought up to speed so I can have an answer for you in the days ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Pinkham. Second part of that question, General, I'll address this to you. Is consideration given to the fact that these are single lock chambers, meaning if there's an unplanned closure that happens on a single lock, that movement along the river is completely halted at that point, to the point I made earlier, this severe economic impact when it's like this. Is that figured into the equation?
Yes, ma'am. It absolutely goes into our calculus because of the lack of redundancy in that part of the system. We had a similar challenge when I was in the Northwest on the Columbia and Snake River system. So in short, yes, ma'am, it goes into our math.
Okay. Let's turn quickly to flood response. Again, as you can imagine, when the Mississippi River is right outside that window, right there, we look very closely at flooding and flood response. A couple years ago now, the Midwest faced really this catastrophic flooding, as you know. So for months, locks along the upper Mississippi were closed. So again, we had to halt the movement of goods because of that flooding, not to mention the property damage and the impact to the growing season. So while Congress passed hundreds of millions of dollars for this emergency response, such as dredging that we had early in June of 2019, of funds took months. And so while relying on emergency funding is never the ideal scenario to begin with, is there a better way to streamline the process so we can get our communities relief faster when it comes to emergency scenarios?
Ma'am, I agree. I don't think we can get this money in the ground fast enough. I'm very familiar with what occurred on the upper Mississippi and the lower Missouri in 2019. There were needs everywhere, but we agreed we were going to work hard to expedite the construction of these very important projects on the concerns of public safety.
Okay, maybe we can drill down a little bit deeper when there's more than the 5 minutes that we have during this. But with that, Madam Chair, I'll yield back. In general, thank you very much, and Mr. Pinkham, thanks to you as well.
Thank you, Congresswoman Bustos, very much. And we will go to Congresswoman Watson Coleman and then Congressman Ryan.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you to our witnesses today. It's been very interesting for me. First of all, I want to say that I want to address this to the Army Corps of Engineers. The Greenbrook Subbasin project is in my district, and I'm pleased with the progress that this project has made. And I just want to thank you all. And I appreciate the fact that we stay in touch and that everyone is working diligently to implement this critical flood risk management program. So cheers to you and thank you very much. I'm also pleased to hear from the testimonies that the Army Corps of Engineers is prioritizing climate resiliency. It's very important to us as it relates to the changing climate and the varying weather patterns, because we're a coastal state and there's a lot of flooding, both when there are big storms that approach, as well as even internal, where there are small rivers and creeks and things of that nature. I would like to know how, when you are developing and designing these projects, how do you incorporate the changing climate and varying weather patterns, particularly in regards to those projects relating to flood and storm damage reduction? And moreover, I'd like to know how you intend to maintain or retrofit or renovate past projects to ensure that they can withstand these climate shocks.
So, ma'am, this is General Spellman. I'll give you a brief answer, a very complicated question, but an excellent one. I will tell you that we've been using, as one example, you're a coastal state, we've been using sea level rise calculators on our coastal projects for the past 12 years. And I think we've been a leader in DOD and even for the federal government. So we've got different scenarios that we design these projects against to prevent the most likely scenarios in the out years ahead. We're also working on a reservoir sedimentation model. We have a number of reservoirs, to include those in New Jersey, that are filling faster with sediment than we had planned. Much of that is just due to the fact that we have more rain events, and the volume of water that's falling in those rain events in the Northeast, in the Northwest, is greater than what we had predicted. And of course, we're also out west dealing with the increased sedimentation from wildfires. And then, ma'am, the last thing I'll leave with you is we're working harder to better understand some recent events. We had the bomb cyclone that was mentioned earlier on the lower Missouri in 2019. We had the derecho come through the state of Iowa last year. We're getting more and more evidence that these events are not new. They may be new to us, but they have happened before. We just didn't have the technology to capture them at the time. So that's another area that we're delving into in our research and development programs, so we better understand moving forward.
Thank you. New Jersey is a state of 537 municipalities, some of which are very, very small. I know firsthand from even family that there are creeks on their properties that overflow because of the sedimentation that has increased over the years, and the municipalities just aren't keeping up with dredging it and doing whatever they have to do to ensure that the adjacent properties are protected. You all do work with municipalities. Do you depend upon them to reach out to you to tell you what they need, what kind of funding they need, what resource they need?
Ma'am, there are a number of different tools that we can use to help. The Continuing Authorities Program is an excellent set of tools to get. But I would recommend that these local leaders.
You keep going out. Chairman, you keep going out. I can't. Madam Chair, I really couldn't hear his response, but I guess I should.
I think the technical people are trying to fix it, Congresswoman Watson-Coleman. And if every member could turn off their or mute their audio, that might help.
This is General Spellman one last time. Ma'am, what I would finally recommend is that the municipality contact the local district. In this case, it's the New York district, and they can guide that group to the most effective tool for their need.
Much. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman Watson-Coleman. We had a little trouble with the audio there. And if there's any follow-up we can help you with, please let me know. Finally, Congressman Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate this. General Spellman, always good to see you. I've got an issue here I want to raise. In your testimony, you said that with the requested funds, the Corps will emphasize investments in high return projects, and that the Corps focuses on high performing projects and programs within its three main water resources missions, one of which is aquatic ecosystem restoration. And I really appreciate hearing that, because I happen to have a high return aquatic ecosystem restoration project in my congressional district. It's the Mahoning River, runs right through 13 communities and cities until it reaches the Ohio-Pennsylvania line. So important is this river to Northeast Ohio that the Mahoning Valley region is named after it. So while I'm happy to hear your priorities align with those of my constituents, I can't help but feel very frustrated, to be honest, with both the Army Corps of Engineers and the EPA, which isn't here to defend itself. The Mahoning River contains 8 mostly obsolete low-head dams and contaminated sediment from a century and a half of steelmaking along the river, the same steel making that helped our nation win World War II. In 1977, the EPA reported that the average net discharge from the 9 major Mahoning River steel plants exceeded 400,000 pounds per day of suspended solids, 70,000 pounds per day of oil and grease, 9,000 pounds per day of ammonia and nitrogen, 500 pounds per day of cyanide, etc. The oil discharge alone was equivalent to over 200 barrels of oil per day. To put those numbers in perspective, the 1988 million-gallon Ashland oil spill on the Monongahela River was characterized as one of the most severe inland oil spills in the nation's history. And by comparison, the much smaller Mahoning River chronically received the equivalent of more than 4 Ashland oil spills every year for decades. General Spellman, I think you understand why I've been trying for over 18 years, since the day I arrived in Congress, to get this river cleaned up. And one would think that the EPA and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the two entities tasked with making sure our rivers are clean, safe, and economically productive, would be eager partners in helping this low-income Rust Belt communities clean up the river. And unfortunately and inexplicably, I have repeatedly been told that there is no federal help available. Why? It's not because the federal government doesn't have the authority to do it. The authority for the Corps to dredge the Mahoning River exists in Section 312B. And as you said in your statement, aquatic ecosystem restoration is one of the very pillars of the Army Corps' mission. And as I think you are aware, the reason that the federal government has given for washing its hands of this high priority project is that the Army Corps claims that if it utilizes Section 312B to dredge the river, then it might get sued by someone under CERCLA. And I just think this is a bureaucratic nonsense. There is no reason that if the Army Corps and the EPA were truly worried about liability, they couldn't work with the state of Ohio and other stakeholders to sign a hold harmless agreement that would protect federal entities from lawsuit. This happens all the time. It should have happened 18 years ago, and indeed I worked with Chairwoman Capter to pass report language specifically urging the Corps to do exactly that, and still nothing was done. So I hope you understand my frustration, General, and I want nothing more than for you and your excellent Pittsburgh District Commander, Colonel Short, who's been absolutely phenomenal to work with over the years, to finally be the people to fix this log jam and clean up the Mahoning River for my constituents. And can you please tell me what you're going to do to help? I can't hear it, Chairwoman.
General Spellman, I'm not sure your audio is on.
Is that any better?
That's better.
Okay. Hey, sir, you have a willing partner in the Corps. I've learned of these projects. I've reached out to Administrator Reagan at the EPA. It makes little sense to have a national capability like the Corps that is very good at cleaning up these type sites. I have over 400 projects today in our floods and foods wrap program, and I'm carrying about $18 billion of liability against those 400 projects. That's so we can take care of a community or individual if something goes wrong. I don't have that liability protection anywhere in my civil works program. So I've asked the administrator to work with us and give us a hold harmless agreement so we can help out the Mahoning River and the bubbly creeks of Chicago. So, sir, we're starting those conversations now with EPA, and we look forward to moving forward on your project and one in Chicago.
General, I can't thank you enough for that. Let's continue to work together, and I know the chairwoman is deeply committed to this as well. So my time is up, but I thank you, and we'll continue to be in contact. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you very much, Congressman Ryan. Progress. It took us about 18 years to build the World War II memorial. So it seems like things when you deal in Washington take 18 years, nearly 2 decades. Now I would like to move to a second round of questioning. I want to thank our witnesses for their endurance and the wonderful participation of our members. I might note that regionally, this subcommittee is so representative. We have had members from the Northeast, Southeast, the Heartland, the Southwest, the Northwest. This is quite a subcommittee to serve on. So I just want to thank all the members for joining us and for their endurance today and for our guests and their endurance. I wanted to move to a question of General Spellman that you weren't warned about, but it's not a real hard question. You might take it for the record. I represent the largest watershed in the Great Lakes. It's called the Western Basin of Lake Erie. It covers parts of 3 states and the western part of Ontario province in Canada. Lake Erie is a troubled lake. I'd like to know if anywhere in the core there is an example of where you have done spatial planning for a very large landscape that drains an agricultural basin that is full of soybeans and corn and over 20 million animals, that then the water works its way down after a rainfall to the mouth of what's called the Maumee River into Lake Erie. And with changing temperatures and no ice cover, we are getting massive algal blooms. Now, we have worked for over 20 years with the agricultural community, with every agency you can imagine, and we've solved about 12% of the problem. We can't wait another 20 years. What I need is a better plan. I don't know whether we're supposed to re-engineer the ditches, whether we're supposed to capture field runoff, if we're supposed to process manure. I mean, I could give you a long list, but I'm interested in the capabilities you have to deal with watersheds that impair fresh waters. We're going to need fresh water. And I hear the problems of algal blooms down in Lake Okeechobee. But we have our problems, big ones, in Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. So my question is, do you have that land water planning capability to take the data we have and to give us clues on what we might do next to be more successful in the shorter term?
Ma'am, we do. I will just caveat my response that I'm giving you is the Corps has very little authority on water quality. I mean, Congress is very clear on who owns water quality. It's a state responsibility under the Clean Water Act. Having said that, I would like to employ more of my research and development capabilities. And I've mentioned to you the work we have ongoing today with the University of Toledo, with Bowling Green, and Ohio State University. We're taking this next 3 years, we're going to take an inoculation approach on Lake Erie. And what I mean by that is we're going to look at, can we use existing bacteria in the lake, augment it safely and chemically to break down the microcystine and the toxins that are in that algae that are harmful for human health. That's what the Corps can offer. And in places like at Lake Okeechobee, on top of that, we can add in some water management options that also help to break up these blooms. But ma'am, that would be my humble recommendation, is allow us to continue on our research and development efforts to inform more long-term solutions on these very large freshwater systems.
Thank you, General, very much. It's really, it's a huge worry. And I thank you for any intelligence you have, any ideas. We'll put a little consortium of the best minds together and figure out what's next, because I'm just getting so many more complaints. My other question, again, relates to the Great Lakes. I have to be her spokesperson here today. The Great Lakes is also a navigation system. And ships transfer goods from port to port and rely on safe and well-managed conditions at both ends of their journey as that wends its way toward its portal to the Atlantic Ocean. It really is the Heartlands corridor. And thankfully, the Great Lakes Navigation System has received more than 10% of the entire harbor maintenance trust fund expenditures for operation and maintenance each year since 2015. Can you, as a military man, describe for us the importance of the Great Lakes Navigation System and the steps that this administration will take to ensure we maintain this system in the manner that it deserves as America's fourth seacoast?
Ma'am, it's a great question, and thank you for that. And then, as you know, the Great Lakes Navigation System, it's critical for trade, not only for the region, but for our nation. It's extensive, over 2,400 miles. It includes 140 harbors, 2 operational locks, and then 104 miles of breakwaters and jetties, and over 600 miles of navigation channel that we maintain. And I will just share with you my commitment to ensure that these harbors and the associated infrastructure will continue to receive robust funding, and we'll continue to make our strongest technical recommendation that we keep this system operational.
Thank you, General. I think in the coming years, it's going to be even more important to the nation. We do have the longest seacoast if you unwind it. And so in view of the time, I would like to move to our ranking member, Mr. Simpson.
Thank you, Chairwoman Capter. I've got one question that I'd like to ask, but before that, I want to kind of comment on something and get your input. Last year, we funded the Whittier Narrows Dam Safety Project at $192.5 million, which was the total cost of the project, or estimated cost of the project. Even though the Army Corps told us that they could probably only spend, if my memory is correct, about $68 million was the maximum that they could spend. Yet the California delegation, some in the California delegation wanted the entire funding, even though they couldn't spend it all, which meant there's over $100 million sitting in an account that you can't spend. That means it's not being spent on other projects and needful projects with the backlog that you all have. I said at the time, if we do this, if we head down this road, what's to prevent, say, and I said at the time, the Florida delegation for asking for full funding of the restoration of the Everglades project, even though the Army Corps can't spend all of that in a year. As I understood your answer to Representative Wasserman Schultz's question, you're going to ask for full funding for the Jacksonville division of what you can spend on the Everglades project. And believe me, I'm a strong supporter of restoring the Everglades. But is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir. That's exactly what I'm saying. I want to fund this district to capability projects that they can put in the ground that year without any overhead, because the need is greater than the resources that we have. So there's plenty of needs across the nation where that additional money doesn't need to sit in that account that you described. It can go to work in other places.
Well, I appreciate that. That's kind of was my argument last year, and I hate to see us heading down this road where we're funding projects and letting money sit in accounts so that politicians can say, we got all this funding, even though we can't spend it, because as you know, there's a backlog out there that needs to be addressed. But this is my question that I would ask all three of you. And I've said many times over the years that I support a variety of innovative financing and alternative delivery tools for both the Army Corps of Engineers and the Bureau of Reclamation. These tools can include public-private partnerships, or P3s, and mechanisms to allow non-federal sponsors a greater role in executing projects. When used correctly and in the appropriate situation, these tools can deliver projects faster and at lower cost to both the federal government and the non-federal sponsors. However, I remain concerned that the executive branch is choosing instead to use these tools simply to pressure non-federal sponsors into paying more than their statutorily required cost shares in order to jump to the front of the line of federal funding. This approach raises serious equity questions, particularly for small, rural, or disadvantaged communities. In Mr. Plombo, in your written testimony states, we will continue to seek to optimize non-federal contributions to accomplish more with our federal dollars. On its face, this statement seems to be my exact concern. Can you please explain more fully what you mean by your testimony and how Reclamation works to avoid equity concerns when utilizing innovative financing tools? And Mr. Pinkham and Mr. Spellman, General Spellman, how do you believe these tools are for the civil works programs? And do you agree that they must be implemented in a way that does not allow certain communities to jump to the front of the line And if so, how can the Corps adjust its use of these tools to ensure we avoid that concern? Long question.
Thank you, Chairman Simpson. I appreciate that question, and it's a critical one. We look at opportunities for P3, public-private partnerships, P4, public-public-private partnerships, but we do that in concert and in collaboration with our non-federal partners. And we only look at it when it makes economic sense and it makes fiscal sense. And if the benefits don't outweigh the costs, it's something that we're not going to pursue. So it is on the forefront of our mind that we only pursue these type of innovative financing systems when it makes sense for all parties. We don't want an inequity issue to arise. We want to make sure we can execute the projects in a timely manner, but do so fairly for all of our constituents. So I recognize your concern. It's something that we think about when we look at these type of opportunities.
And sir, this is General Spellman. I'll just add to that we absolutely appreciate the concerns that you have put before us with non-federal implementation. As Mr. Palumbo said, we want to promote both efficiency and equity. And the way we're going to go about this, specifically with 1043. So, you know, we have two 1043 pilot projects ongoing right now, one in Illinois and one down in Texas. We've learned a lot as we've gone through that. Moving forward, before we get into a next round of projects, we're in the process now of updating our implementation guidance to the field. We're going to take that out and get public comment on it. And then, sir, we want to put that before you as well to make sure that we're addressing all of your concerns before we discuss authorizing any future projects along those lines. And, sir, as I said in my opening statement, we absolutely want to get after these tools that Congress has given us, but we've got to do it efficiently and we've got to do it with equity.
Well, I appreciate
Gentleman's
that.
time has expired.
I think P3
go
is
ahead.
very important. I just don't want communities that are more rural and not as rich to be jumped over the top of. And I understand, I know you understand that concern.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Congresswoman Frankel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is the sound okay? Because I got a word from your committee that there was a weird noise. Is it okay now?
It sounds much better. Thank you.
Okay, I don't know what that was, but anyway, thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I want to get back to this issue of the lake level, Lake Okeechobee, and I want to restate that my stakeholders here believe that alternate BB is the only plan that actually improves the water supply to a pre-LORS 208 level of service. And they believe that the Army Corps made a commitment to them that would be where they would be going, and that is the most balanced alternative. They tell me that in discussions with the Army Corps, they were told, number one, that and you can tell me whether this is true. They were told, first of all, that the purpose of repairing the dike was not to hold more water, but to just guard against floods. And number two, when they explained that there would be serious economic repercussions for especially the people who lived around the lake and the agriculture community, and that President Biden had an executive order on environmental justice, that they were told that that order came after the LOSM study, so that wouldn't be considered. That doesn't sound right at all. That's two questions. Third is, we never got to this, is it possible for you to give these stakeholders more time to present their economic study before your July deadline? And then you also mentioned that if you could get more resources for these study on on your study, your environmental study, that you could maybe able to solve the algae problem. So could you elucidate on that and just say, do you have the 4 questions or do I need to repeat them again?
Ma'am, I'll take my best swing. I think I've got them all. I'll start at the back end. What the R&D program is called Habitats, and I'm sorry for the acronym. It's the Harmful Algal Bloom Interception and Treatment System. we'll report a capability moving forward for an additional $2.5 million. What that'll allow us to do is increase tenfold the amount of water and algae that we've taken from the lake, and we want that information to inform a more industrial scale operation. That was your first.
So let me ask, would that influence the Loathsome decision?
Ma'am, I don't believe it'll influence the Loathsome decision. Let me go back to you. Asked, can we delay the release of? So Congress has put in law that we will release Loathsome in concert with the Herbert Hoover Dike completion, which is scheduled for October of next year. Ma'am, so no decisions have been made, and I understand we're getting a lot of meaningful public comment, and we certainly want that to continue. We did put 5 alternatives out for consideration. The next step in this process, we will continue with the community engagement, but we will put out a draft Loathsome manual in January of this year, and that goes out for public comment. And then we've got to adjudicate all of those comments, and that would be the appropriate time. If the district felt it needed more time to complete the final, we would come back to Congress and ask for that additional time. But that would be following the public comment period from the draft Loathsome manual coming in January.
So if I understand the stakeholders, I hear an echo. Madam Chair, are you getting an echo from me? Okay.
Just ask everyone to turn off their microphone if they are not speaking, please. Proceed, Congresswoman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so do the stakeholders still have some time to submit their economic study?
Yes, ma'am. We do not intend to go final with a record of decision for Loathsome until October of 2022, and that's in concert with completing the dike rehabilitation.
That sounds good. And you are going to, I'm assuming you are going to consider the President Biden's executive order on the environmental justice.
Ma'am, we incorporate environmental justice into all of our projects and our operations, and have since it was first issued by President Clinton.
Okay, thank you very much. Madam Chair, thank you so much. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Frankel. You're a faithful attendee. Congressman Newhouse.
Mr. Pinkham, I know you're new to your role, but I also know that you're very familiar with the Columbia River Treaty, as are you, General Spellman. With the impending deadline for changes for flood risk management after 2024, we need to be planning now to ensure that plans are in effect by the time they're needed, either under the current or under a revised treaty. Each of you on the panel deals with these issues, so I would encourage you all to provide an update to the committee on the status of flood risk management planning for funding purposes as soon as possible. But in addition to a formal response following this hearing, what are you able to share about the status of flood risk management planning with or without modifications to the treaty? Is the Corps completing planning for funding for flood risk management in 2024 and beyond? And is it correct that the Corps needs no further authority to make payments to Canada for flood risk management?
Sir, this is General Spellman, so I'll start. As you know, our interest in the Columbia River Treaty from the beginning was maintaining similar levels of flood protection for the people in the region. Sir, you know, we're military, so we're always planning for contingencies on which direction the negotiations may go. And sir, I would welcome the opportunity to come and behind closed doors, give you an update on the more specifics of the negotiations.
Okay, I look forward to that. Let's make that happen. Mr. Pinkham, any comment?
Congressman Newhouse, I share General Spellman's commitment to meet with you one-on-one to help give you an update on the treaty process.
Okay, good. Thank you both, gentlemen. Turning gears just a little bit, Mr. Palumbo, the Yakima Basin Integrated Water Management Plan, which I believe you're aware of, is something that I'm very proud of and continue to champion, but it calls for upstream salmon passage at the Cleellum Dam. There were tests conducted to improve passage using new fish technologies in the summer of 2017. According to the researchers who conducted the test, the installed systems really performed quite well. Is there any effort to have new fish passage systems permanently deployed at reclamation dams for upstream passage? And how can we, if I might, Madam Chair, how can we as a subcommittee support those efforts?
Thank you very much, Congressman, for number one, your support of the Yakima Integrated Plan. I understand all of your support over the years. It's been very helpful for us with the Yakima Nation, with the local irrigation districts, with the state of Washington, and of course with the Bureau of Reclamation. We appreciate that. We're very proud of Fish Passage in general and very proud of the project at the Cleellum Fish Passage project in particular. Relative to your question, the Bureau of Reclamation piloted that research to explore an opportunity in our labs in Denver, and we've deployed that to the field. So that is currently under construction at the Cleellum Fish Passage. We're making very good progress. We have several contracts underway currently. We expect to complete that project in the next couple of years to allow that juvenile fish passage, and very, very excited about seeing that deployed on the ground. And we're committed to other areas to deploy fish passage as well.
Well, we stand ready to assist you in that and look forward to continuing working with you on improving fish passage at reclamation dams. So thank you very much for that response. Madam Chair, I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much, Congressman Newhouse. You as well, a very faithful attendee. I just think we have the greatest committee. I just on both sides of the aisle, we don't get a lot of publicity. We're conducting America's business, and so are you. And it is what the Congress is meant to do from its very founding. And this particular subcommittee is so regionally representative. I'm just so proud of everyone that serves on it and the type of work that we do for the country. I'm going to go through a very brief third round, won't take long, I'm sure, but I wanted to ask Mr. Palumbo if you could find me somewhere at the Bureau of Reclamation a 5-minute summary of some of the current challenges facing our country. For example, the recent challenges to the Colorado River in ways that the American people could understand. We will put it on our websites. We will try to educate the public. I think the New Republic had a really great article, if I'm thinking the correct magazine, about the Colorado River to put into perspective, a broader perspective, what America is facing in different regions of this very great nation. I don't know if you have that or not. I was going to ask General Spellman for the same information for the Army Corps and to take what you have and extract from it information for the American people about the importance of certain waterways, some of the current challenges we face, and don't speak in engineers' language, speak in earth science language so that the public can understand. Really, many schools don't teach geography anymore. People don't even know the way rivers flow, the directions that they flow. So I think it's important for our website and for us as a subcommittee to help educate the country, to help educate the press, to help educate teachers about some of these changing conditions of our country for the sake of the future. So if you two could just think about that, I'd be very grateful. Also, I wanted to ask Mr. Pinkham in these closing moments, the President's budget request overview for the Corps of Engineers provided Congress with some insight into this administration's priorities and noted it would invest in what they called high return projects. For instance, some may consider certain commercial navigation projects as high return projects, whereas others may value other ecosystem restoration projects as having an equal or higher return of a different nature. How do you see this administration weighing the various types of projects that the Corps oversees, and where do you see this administration placing its highest priorities? Broadly speaking, what are the themes or goals of the administration's priorities that will guide your budget request that we will be receiving later in the week?
Thank you, Chair Captor, for the question. And what really enticed me to accept this position with this administration were its priorities, and the priorities around climate change, social environmental justice, and because of my background, strengthening the relationships with tribes. So I look at those through that lens of the priorities that I really want to work with this administration on and fulfilling, getting this nation prepared and adequately teed up to respond to the climate change challenges that we're facing, as well as the social and environmental justice. And I realize that's not answering your question specifically about how you balance the competing kind of challenges and values and needs that are out there in a community. And that's one of the things I need to work with you on is better understanding. What are those challenges on the ground that the communities are struggling with, and how can I work with the communities and this committee in addressing the setting of those priorities?
Thank you very much, Mr. Pinkham. We look forward to working with you. I understand that my dear colleague, Mr. Simpson, has no further questions. If that is correct, I would like to ask any other member who is currently still seated if they have any questions at this time.
Chairwoman Captor, this is
Thank you.
Simpson.
Yes, Congressman Simpson.
I don't have any further questions, but I did want to say, if you want to read history of the Colorado River and the basin and the challenges it faces, there's a book out called Science Be Damned. Very interesting book that I would encourage anybody to read. But I'm sure there's other perspectives also. But I just wanted to say I would be remiss if I didn't welcome Jamie to his new position. And it's good to see you again, and I look forward to working with you in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Simpson. I look forward to the partnership as well.
You bet.
I want to thank Ranking Member Simpson. He's a very studious member, a man who should serve this country. Just before I left Washington, he tracked me down and gave me a book to read about some of America's most important minerals and critical elements that we should pay attention to. And it's interesting to me, some of what the press focuses on. This is really serious business, and we have a serious committee. And it's just great to know these members of Congress. It gives you hope for the future. So thank you, Congressman Simpson. And I'll ask any other member who is currently seated, if you have an additional question, now's the time. Congresswoman Frankel? All right, very good. In closing today, I just want to thank many of our staff who've made today's excellent hearing possible. On our side of the aisle, Jamie Schimmick, Mike Brain, Lauren Like, Matt Kaplan, and Will Ostertag. And finally, on the minority side, Angie Giancarlo. I will say that we are now concluding this afternoon's hearing. I would like to thank our witnesses for joining us today and ask our witnesses to please ensure for the hearing record that questions for the record and any supporting information requested by the subcommittee are delivered in final form to us no later than 3 weeks from the time you receive them. Members who have additional questions for the record will have until the close of business on Wednesday to provide them to the subcommittee office. Again, thank you to everyone. Thank you, Ranking Member Simpson. This hearing is adjourned.